seconds later it will on. Please check it.
YouTube is okay.
Anna, anytime you can
YouTube
start.
works well. Yes, I just checked. YouTube works well. From my side, actually, at least.
Yes. Everything's working and they're recording. Okay. Have a good session.
Thank
Hello,
you.
how are you? I'm Roxana. I'm from Pakistan.
Nice to meet you. It is really a pleasure to meet you. So,
hi, Inga. I saw Inga, president of ICOM Georgia. How are you, my dear friends?
Fine, Saadet. How are
Hi,
you?
nice to see you again. I'm very glad to see you again.
Me too.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we can start. First of all, I would like to big thank to the organizers who initiated this international online conference, and thank you that ICOM Georgia taking its part into this session. So we took the topic for the session, Museums and Sustainable Development Goals. And we will talk about first it is me who will talk about the relationship and general connections. What is the connection between these two aspects? And then the speakers will continue just in particular ways how the museums can make into practice these sustainable development goals in their activities. And in short, we can just use the word SDGs, which is, of course, everybody knows that this is a sustainable development goals. I would like to ask you just to share my screen if it is fine. And because, yeah, thank you. Oh, just a moment. Okay. Yeah, so everyone can see the screen. As I already told you, my topic is to talk about to cover the connections of museums and sustainable development goals and the contributions museum can make in completing these goals by 2030. As far as all of you know, many museum specialists and other people have talked about these connections and about this collaboration and the synergy, and all of them are mostly raising awareness of museums' role in terms of supporting the SDGs and addressing to the museums, introducing them ways they can act for the future sustainable world. That's why ICOM Georgia decided to respond this topic today. And as you agree, this is a really relevant topic for today. And also we can also mention, and I will again will address to ICOM's consideration about sustainable development goals, how it was integrated into the International Museum Day activities. So once again, to talk about these connections and raise awareness, it's always a good idea, and will support these museums to know more about the sustainable development goals and to know more how they can be integrated into implementing these goals. Every museum and each museum worker has something to offer to this agenda, and therefore our session is dedicated to the museums and SDGs. We are aiming to help all people, just all of the museum workers, to understand the United Nations Agenda 2030 and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, to support it, to help museum professionals achieve the ambitions of the SDGs through their own work, to understand that the Sustainable Development Goals are an important opportunity for museums and museum specialists, but it is important to cite the opportunity to get benefit from playing our part in this really ambitious agenda. The Sustainable Development Goals, I cannot turn, oh yes. The Sustainable Development Goals are set of the 17 goals and 169 targets agreed by all UN member states, and with the aim to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. They address the global challenges we face, including those related to poverty, inequality, climate, environmental problems, prosperity, and peace and justice. The goals interconnected, and as UN declares, in order to leave no one behind, it is important that we achieve each goal and target by 2030. The Sustainable Development Goals follow on from the Millennium Development Goals, which aimed to address the basic needs of the world's poorest countries. But unlike the MDGs, unlike the Millennium Development Goals, the SDGs cover all countries, not only the poorest countries, and it is not possible to ensure a fair, sustainable future without considering the needs of all people and global natural resources and environments. I will just give you brief videos what are these really Sustainable Development Goals, and then I will go directly about the connection with museums. Yes, this is a small short clip which is produced by United Nations about raising awareness of the Sustainable Development Goals. Of course, these SDGs address broad spectrum of social and environmental challenges in order to set the world on a path to a sustainable future by 2030. The SDGs were anonymously agreed to by the 193 members of the United Nations in September 2015. They are explained in the Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The SDGs are also sometimes referred as the 2030 Agenda or the Global Goals. SDGs are about achieving a future where people, communities, society, and nature better support one another in a balanced way. That makes sustainability the destination and sustainable development activities that helps achieve sustainability. Sustainable development can be summarized as working to do better and do less harm. So how the SDGs are relevant for the museums and what are the connections between them? So in 2015, UNESCO produced recommendation regarding the protection and promotion of museums and collections, their diversity and their role in society. This highlighted the strong connections between museums and sustainable development. Museums have the short-term text from this recommendation. Museums have great potential to raise public awareness of the value of the cultural and natural heritage and of the responsibility of all citizens to contribute to their care and transmissions. Museums also support economic development, notably through cultural and creative industries and tourism. This recommendation draws the attention of member states to the importance of the protection and promotion of museums and collections, so that they are partners in sustainable development through the preservation and protection of heritage. The protection and promotion of cultural diversity, the transmission of scientific knowledge, the development of educational policy, lifelong learning and social cohesion, and the development of the creative industries and the tourism economy. According to the founder of Curating Tomorrow, Henry Mackey, the SDGs are not just for governments. They are an invitation of all sectors of society in all places to collaborate and participate in the achievement of the 2030 agenda. The SDGs are an incredible opportunity for anyone, any organization, and any sector to collaborate in pursuit of common goals, leveraging their skills, capacities, and unique resources. Of course, like other agendas, the SDGs are worthless unless they are those with the drive and determination to bring about change. Fortunately, there are a number of cultural institutions that have already shown their willingness to act decisively. Highlighting social issues and encouraging actions is nothing new for museums, as evidenced by exhibitions which have taken place both around the world and over the years. Of course, culture plays an important role in the SDGs implementation, as museums and other cultural institutions have been globally responsible for sustainable development. Moreover, SDGs target 11.4 encourages the safeguarding of the world's cultural and natural heritage. Museums and SDGs, what are the how do these goals impact the roles and actions of museums today, and how are museums putting these responsibilities into practice? The answer is just the one and simple. Museums have explicitly been given a role in achieving SDGs targets, like education, healthcare, sanitation, energy, and other sectors. Culture, especially museums, have been given a responsibility to put the SDGs into practice through their work. This provides new opportunities for museums, but also an increased sense of responsibility. Nowadays, museums have their part in this plan, and they must prove they deserve it. Again, I will refer to Henry, which is the British researcher and founder of the Curating Tomorrow. He created wonderful guide, museums and sustainable development goals, and this is a guide how museums, galleries, and other cultural sector and their partners can be integrated into the implementation of sustainable development goals. This guide is intended to help empower museums to play their fullest part in the SDGs. It does not claim to have all the answers, but it is a start, and it has been developed to be useful and practical and sensitive to the fact that different countries, different museum types, and different role types each face particular issues. There are many different realities facing museums and those working in and with them, just as there are different realities in terms of social and environmental issues around the world. Museums have a great deal to offer to this agenda. Henry also underlines that some of the SDGs will not be achieved without museums, so museums are necessary to implement these goals. This guide also aims to help help museums play their part. There is no single right way to contribute to the SDGs, and so long as the principles of sustainability are followed, no wrong way. The SDGs are also not about continuing with businesses as usual, but about clear, committed, focused action to enhance positive impacts and reduce negative impacts. Museums are closely linked to some of the targets of the SDGs, especially around protecting and safeguarding cultural and natural heritage, supporting education for sustainable development, and supporting research and cultural participation. Agenda 2030 and the SDGs need museums and to play their part to the agenda to be successful. On the other hand, museums also need the SDGs. They help them connect with other sectors, put their amazing resources to good use, and offer them an ambitious global agenda that helps them demonstrate their relevance and impacts. This guide also summarizes what is the SDG actually, and this is I think, and many people in the museum world and the outside, they think that this is really practical and useful guide what Henry Mackey created, and there are many aspects which has to be considered by all people who are involved in the SDGs. So the 7 activities what Henry highlighted for museums, and museums can take part in their implementation of the SDGs. So these are protecting and safeguarding the world's cultural and natural heritage, both within museums and more generally. Support and provide learning opportunities in support of the SDGs. Enable cultural participation for all. Support sustainable tourism. Enable research in support of the SDGs. Direct internal leadership, management, and operations towards the SDGs. And the last one, direct external leadership, collaboration, and partnership towards the SDGs. So these are the 7 key activities that museums can take part in implementation of the SDGs 2030. The way in which museums can engage with the sustainable development goals may not seem to so apparent at first. For me, it was the same. So yet the SDGs are broad enough to encapsulate many of the interests that museums have and are adaptable to the resources and outreach of every institution. As a fact steps, there are 3 goals that and the targets with them that specially address museum actions. So this goal is number 4, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning. And the target 4.7, this target calls cultural centers and museums to educate their public on sustainable development values and lifestyles. As are gender equality, human rights, global citizenship, and peace over violence. The next goal is goal number 10, reduce inequality within and among countries. And target 10.2 further promotes inclusion for all in economic, social, and political spheres, irrespective of their age, sex, race, economic, or other status. And the next 3rd goal, number 16, it is a promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development. And target 16.10 urges the accessibility of information to the public to protect fundamental freedoms. But museums can do more. And there is another person which I would like to highlight, yes, Jasper Visser. This is an international consultant and advisor for cultural and civic organization. He has had experience applying the Millennium Development Goals. Now these Millennium Development Goals are transformed into SDGs, and he has worked in several institutions via these Millennium Development Goals. He transformed theory into practice and results. He has conducted a webinar on museums and SDGs, and this webinar was organized by NEMON, Network of European Museum Organizations. So in this webinar, Jasper Visser underlines implementation of local change to generate global change, which is exactly where museums come in. These are 3 strategies underlined within which museums can frame their engagement in the SDGs. Museums focus on internal changes. Museums can change internally, we can say. Jasper remarks that taking on the SDG challenges is a strategic decision in order to become future-proof organizations. Internalizing SDGs require the inclusion of the totality of the museum staff, as everyone can think of ways to make their tasks more sustainable, however big or small this may be. Alongside making easy and intuitive fixes, like switching for renewable resources of energy or providing free drinking water, we suggest bringing in the museum audience as an auditor for museum performances of the SDGs, allowing them analyze the progress that has been made and suggest what are the points that should be tackled next. The next one, museums can lead the way, museums leading the way. In that way, we suggest that museums evaluate all the goals and focus on 1 or 2, which they feel resonate most with the stories they are trying to tell. Moreover, museums should be conscious of the societies that are part of it and work in partnership with it to create a sustainable future within the community. It is highlighted that the actions museums decide to take in line with the SDGs should reflect the museum story as well, as we have an actual impact. Those are the truly meaningful changes that SDGs call for. And the last one, museums can support others. Museums can become a platform for local initiatives and also entrepreneurs that support the SDGs, making their resources and influence available to those that may not be community referent just yet, but may convey strong messages by making use of museums as platforms. So here we can just refer as an example how the museums and other creative industry started to work together. And as we know, museums and creative industries, they're working together, create services that provide the audience with easy to understand language, which is understandable today. It is a contemporary language, while the product created is easily comprehensible and meets the desires and needs of today's audience. So, as a representative of the global museum community, the vision of ICOM is a world where the importance of natural and cultural heritage is universally valued. Today, more than ever, museums face unique challenges related to social, economic, and ecological issues. While serving as witnesses of the past and guardians of humanity's treasures for future generations, museums play a key role in development through education and democratization. In this context, ICOM has established a working group on sustainability, and the working group's mission is to help ICOM consider how to mainstream sustainable development goals and the Paris Agreement across its range and activities, including International Museum Day, and to support its members to contribute constructively in upholding the sustainable development goals. And as a result, we know that past International Museum Day already included the SDGs, goal number 13, and as every year, International Museum Day will focus on a set of SDGs as ICOM decided. The SDGs, of course, they are not perfect, but they are by far the best available blueprint for focusing hearts and hands for creating a better future together. I will again refer to Henry Mackey. So I won't go into details which goal can in details be integrated into the museum activities. Of course, the sustainable development goals are universal. And why it is universal? Because that everyone is able to find their own way to act and contribute to reach the success for sustainability. And my wonderful colleagues and speakers of today's sessions will broaden these issues in their presentation, how museums are putting their responsibilities into practice, and you can hear from their presentation. Of course, we are not able to cover all mentioned goals, which are just connected to the museum work, and museum can play the role in their implementation. This work is a continuing process, and I'm sure that all of us will do its best for the sustainable future, which is also at the same time the guarantee for the sustainability of our museums. So I would like to finish with this word. My presentation, and there is a reference which I addressed during doing my presentation, and thank you very much. And if you have the questions, I think we will have the possibility at the end of the sessions to answer, and I will pass the word to the next speaker if it is okay for the organizer. Thank you very much.
Can I be next?
Yes, actually, you are the next. So Anna Tsiklauri, she is a museum a master program student. She is working as a public program coordinator at the Museum of Tbilisi Art Academy, and she will present the topic museums and climate change, where to make a difference. So without further ado, I will give the word to Anna Tsiklauri, please.
Thank you, Anna. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. In today's session, I want to draw your attention to climate change and discuss the aspects of museums' work that can be adopted in order to address the challenges of global environmental change. Climate change is, of course, one of the greatest challenges of our time. Each year, we seem to reach new levels of climate extremes with record temperatures, melting ice, and devastating weather events affecting communities and ecosystems on every continent. And we understand that without drastic action today, adapting to these impacts in the future will be way more difficult, and doing nothing will end up costing us a lot more than if we take action now. So to address climate change, we have to vastly increase our efforts. Much has happened around the world. In 1992, the world's governments committed to addressing the rapidly growing threat of global climate change by adopting the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which came into force in 1994. In December 2015, the Paris Agreement was adopted, in which all countries committed to take action to address climate change. And the 2015 also saw the launch of Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, the most ambitious program to secure a sustainable future. The Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals are closely aligned with the Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement. The SDGs, as we mentioned, are the most universally recognized framework for addressing sustainability in the world and are used by governments, businesses, and organizations across all sectors. Agenda 2030 is achieved through 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and climate change is the subject of Sustainable Development Goal number 13, but it relates to all the goals. Of course, climate change is much more than just an environmental or scientific concern. It impacts on all aspects of social, cultural, political, and economic life, including museums. Museums are specifically mentioned in the work plan for the Paris Agreement, acknowledging the important role that museums can play in the 6 pillars of action for climate empowerment, informally known as ACE. ACE specifies the importance of public education, training of key groups. It also underlines the importance of public awareness campaigns, public participation in climate change decision-making, and public access to information relating to science and policy regarding climate change. And of course, international cooperation, which strengthens these 5 elements. Museums present a huge potential to support ACE with around 55,000 museums in the world, reaching hundreds of millions of people each year. They are trusted by these large numbers of people that they reach for formal or informal education, and many museums already deliver many programs that align with the ACE and the SDGs. Also, museums are skilled at making learning accessible, engaging, and fun, and they can help people understand and explore the importance and impacts of climate change. Museums as spaces for intercultural dialogue, learning, discussion, training, and education have a wealth of resources that can contribute positively towards climate action. So how then can these qualities translate into concrete action to address climate change? Well, we have a number of great examples of museums addressing climate change. Even we have museums dedicated to climate change, for example, Jockey Club Museum of Climate Change in Hong Kong, which was opened in 2013 and is one of the first museums in the world dedicated to climate change. The museum works closely with university students, training them as guides to explain and activate their exhibitions. The great example of how museums can easily embrace a more activist role in their communities is Tate Modern. In addition to declaring a climate emergency, Tate Modern has opened its doors to creative climate activist groups such as Extinction Rebellion as a platform for discussion. And regarding museums' buildings being environmentally friendly and sustainable, the great example is Natural History Museum of Utah. The building and surrounding grounds have been designed and built according to the standards for leadership in energy and environmental design with gold certification. And the museum worked with its architects and construction teams to incorporate green elements throughout the design, construction, and operations of the building. Of course, these examples are quite large scale, which is why questions arise to what museums that are only now beginning to discuss climate change and wish to take appropriate actions to raise public awareness of this issue, but maybe have relatively limited resources can do, where and with what kind of changes can they start and where can they make a difference? Well, advice would be to start with simple actions. To begin with, appropriate measures need to be integrated into the day-to-day operations of the museum, and this process of a big transformation can start with a small and actionable solutions. For example, making one part of the museum sustainable, may it be packaging. Commit to reduce climate impacts of packaging and reducing waste. There are many ways to do so, including replacing traditional plastics made from fossil fuels with biopolymers, redesigning packaging to be more compact and so efficient for transport and storage, and using biodegradable packaging materials, to name just a few practices. The very popular solution is creating a zero waste events. Many museums host several annual events a year, and by making just one of these events zero waste, it can act as a significant step forward in terms of both action and awareness. One of the simplest solutions is putting up signs and reminders around the museum, which will draw attention to actions and hopefully behavioral change, and also establishing a low print policy with a move to a more digital communication. You can try replacing museum brochures with QR codes and rethink publication formats. E-catalogs, for example, can be purchased online. Simple steps also include building a safe water supply to reduce the number of plastic bottles, and working in alliance with public and private entities and partnering with like-minded museums and organizations to support one another in the process. Also, one key way that museums can show that they are sustainable and that they are environmentally friendly is is ensuring that their buildings are environmentally friendly. Many museums have a large environmental impact themselves in the ways that they run their buildings. So a few simple steps to change that negative impact on environment would be converting the lighting system to LED, creating a bicycle parking to encourage museum staff and visitors to cycle to the museum, and maybe turning the green space around the museum into a community garden or a public park. Another great way that museums can contribute to climate action is by communicating climate crisis to public. As mentioned earlier, they are trusted by a very large number of people, so they can serve as a vital bridge between science and the public interest by initiating and hosting this dialogue. In this process, few simple tips would be to make the science meaningful and use familiar concepts to help people understand science and statistics. Also use images and stories to make it real. Most people understand the world through stories rather than statistics and graphs. So aiming for a narrative structure and showing the human face behind the science when presenting information will help you tell a more compelling story. Also make it local, show local climate impacts, and while doing that, stay positive and lead with solutions and how your audience can become a part of these solutions. Highlight the benefits of taking action on an individual, local, and global scale. And lastly, invite participation. Leave people with a sense of options and opportunities and provide tangible actions and roadmaps for ongoing engagement. And lastly, I would say one of the most important steps would be the development of educational programs. As I mentioned earlier when talking about the role of museums in supporting the ACEs and the SDGs, the educational part of it is where museums, I believe, play the biggest part. So they can use their programming to educate visitors about climate change actions that they can take. They can work to raise their awareness of local and global issues and their links into their everyday lives and experiences. For that, museums can offer workshops and training programs to help foster awareness of the need to protect the environment. They can produce virtual materials for families, learners, and everyone to access online. They can support discussion and, of course, enable research for climate action. Of course, systematic changes starts with these little step-by-step adjustments, but those steps should be directed towards transformations of the fundamental features and principles of the system itself. Lastly, I included some inspiring projects and platforms and resources. It's truly a relief to find so many organizations working to foster the necessary changes to protect the environment, but I have included those platforms that are focused on cultural sector and museums. And also the guide that Lana mentioned, also a great way to understand the relation between sustainable development goals and museums. Museums have truly come a long way even since the signing of the Paris Agreement and the establishment of the SDGs in 2015. And there is a long way to go yet, but it's important that in the process, we as museum professionals recognize that we have a responsibility to play a key role in addressing climate change. In that case, more and more kinds of people will be engaged with the climate action and the sustainable development agenda. With changes in our approaches and with our initiatives in terms of our educational programs, exhibitions, workshops, and other aspects of activities, in 2030, we will be able to say that we as museum professionals and museums played their part in creating a better future. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Anna. It was just really a good overview about the climate action and how museums can, and very good tips and recommendations what the museums can do for this climate action target. So we are moving to the next speaker. This is Tatia Gagua. She is a managing partner of the Science Museum in Georgia, and she is also a museology MA student at Tbilisi State Academy of Arts. Tatia's presentation refers about the role of museums in understanding impacts of climate changes. So please.
Hello to everyone once more. So as Lana said, my topic is about role of museums in understanding impacts of climate change. So, and okay. Now we live in a new era which is full of challenges, where every new day is more difficult than the previous day. Everyday problems like local and global conflicts, human rights, homophobia, poverty, and global pandemic, and an economic crisis do not give us the possibility to think about the biggest problem like climate change and the consequences of what we see every day in real life or on TV. This factor, combined with artificial problems made by humans, such as wars, inequality, growth in energy usage, and non-effective governments, which can end the world. The listed problems cannot be resolved locally or individually. In this case, it also would be more expensive, tiring, or not very effective. The only real chance to resolve all those problems is to increase social awareness globally and deal with problems in education. One of the best platforms for raising the long-term informational and educational level is in society like our museums, and they can be one of the best places for positive impact. Like, what can we do against a global problem? I mean, like museums. Do we vaccinate people? No, but we can raise awareness about how important vaccination is. Do we clean streets? Of course, no. And also we can do as individuals, but it is more important for us to inform people about ecological catastrophe and how to avoid it. Do museums work on alternative energy? No, but we can inform society about exhaustive energy resources and alternative ways of producing electricity. And in this case, when we talk about museum roles, about global and not only global, about local problems, I think one of the best examples are this quote from made by American Museum Association. The best museums use their possible of trust to encourage people to reflect on society's contemporary changes. They promote social justice and human rights, challenge prejudice, and champion fairness and equality. Nowadays, we are so busy with everyday problems, so we need some reason to start thinking about more global ones. In my opinion, museums are sort of reminders about huge problems and platforms where we can start thinking and create a dialogue about climate change, for example, and its consequences. Starting dialogue about problems helps us to find ways to resolve it. Bringing forward different social and educational problems to boost public thought about them is not a new phenomenon for museums, because museums have been creating exhibitions, and not only exhibitions, also educational programs about that for centuries now. And okay, next slide is this. Museums could be used as a platform to discuss current issues, as we said, highlighting issues people have no knowledge or opinions on, and creating meaningful messages that help people ask questions, develop critical thinking skills, and debate and discuss any differences in opinion, which has a huge role in the processes of changing society. I want to talk about one example is like energy system and energy resources. As we all know, the resources given from our Earth are not enough. The Earth can't provide for us forever. And this case, one of the best thing we can do is to organize thematic exhibitions or educational programs, and how we already know museums are doing that for centuries, for years at least. A transition from the fossil fuel driven energy system to a sustainable one is an enormous global change of today. Climate change and finite resources require countries all over the world to change their way of producing, transporting, and using energy. The energy transition will require major changes worldwide. Those changes will not only affect to technical sector, but will also include ecological questions, social issues, and political matters. Over the course of human history, humanity has repeatedly found new energy sources to exploit. The sources either supplement or replace existing ones, constantly changing which resources we rely on most. Today, many countries are engaging for the first time in discussions about deliberate and fundamental transitions on their energy supply. And during the COP21 in 2015 in Paris, 195 countries agreed to limit global warming by increasing the share of renewable energy and raising to overall energy efficiency, or ever by reducing fossil fuel subsidies. The two main goals are to reduce CO2 emissions and to achieve the fairer distribution of global emissions and resources. This politically guided transformation of the worldwide energy system is historically unprecedented. And one of the best examples of demonstrating the educational role of museum in resolving global problems is the exhibition, which was displayed in the Deutsches Museum in 2017. Name of this exhibition was like Turning Energy Around. The exhibition revealed that discusses those different paths and invites visitors to actively take part in the political process. The exhibition opened like in 2017, as we told, and was displayed during 1 year. And after that, the exhibition started traveling to other museum destinations worldwide. Present-day science museums and science centers do not only explore historical or scientific objects and experiments. It has become more and more important to encourage critical thinking and allow visitors to make up their own mind on contemporary issues. Energy transition, as shown in Turning Energy Around in this exhibition, deals with a variety of complex environmental and social questions. And Deutsches Museum, where was displayed this exhibition first, decided to take on that wicked problem and contributed to the understanding and acceptance of energy transition. The exhibition displayed the timeline on energy system history from the beginning of industrialization to the current situation, to transition from a wood-based to a coal-based energy system, the electrification of the world, and finally the fossil fuel era, which began in the second half of the 20th century and led to a massive increase in energy usage. The museum convinced that a transition from fossil fuels to alternative energy sources and more responsible care taking can only be successful if science, the general public, business also, and politics work together in the pursuit of common goals. The interactive exhibition, like Turning Energy Around, made clear that they believe that there is not a right or wrong way for energy transition. The main message of the exhibition was let's make energy transition happen, but how? Target audience of this exhibition were students and adults. To facilitate participation, the exhibition provided general scientific knowledge about energy system and motivated visitors to make their own decisions within the exhibition as well as in a real life. A timeline containing graphics and illustrations served as an opportunity to learn about general terms and principles of energy. It also illustrated how energy usage, population, and CO2 emissions have grown a lot over the past decades, how humanity's incredible thirst for energy has led to two major problems, like first the burning of finite fossil fuel resources, and second, climate change. Visitors were then asked to take action, get involved, and design their own energy transition. Slipping into the role of a politician, they met virtual stakeholders who confront them with their opinions and demands. The visitors finally need to take a stand and choose political measures to advance their energy transition. Role play allows visitors to design their own energy transition system while pretending to be decision maker politicians. And during this 1 year, while it was displayed, this exhibition in this museum, about 500,000 people visited this exhibition, and 22,650 people took part in these games, role play games. This means that the visitors took their time to deliberate about the different topics and exchanged ideas and opinions. And finally, I started thinking about some exam from Georgia. And first, which was very impactful for me, and I remembered was this project, Planet or Plastic. In 2019, the Georgian National Museum in Tbilisi opened a photo exhibition, Planet or Plastic. But before that, in May 2018, well-known National Geographic launched an international campaign, Planet or Plastic, aiming to reduce the amount of single-use plastics that end up in the ocean. The project's goal was to spread information about the problem and to find ways to solve it. This photo exhibition in Georgia National Museum took just 3 hours, but this project made by National Geographic, had follow-up. Like the central subway station was full of those pictures. Like this, I will show, which we see what plastic is doing with our environment. And I remember it was so impactful. One my co-worker told me once, who was passing these pictures every day to her way on her work, that after she saw these pictures, she rethought how many plastic was using and decided to decrease the amount of plastic in her life. And she is just one, and millions, about millions saw this picture too. So that was my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tatya. Thank you. So now we give the word to last speaker, Anna Zhvania. She is educational manager at Georgian National Museum and National Gallery and PhD student at Tbilisi State University. Anna will talk about museums as an actors for social change. So please.
Okay. Hello to everybody. I'm so happy to be here today, and I want to share my presentation. Lana, is it on
it's
the
on the screen? Just make it full screen.
Okay, like this. Okay. Yes. So my today's topic is museums as actors for social changes. And I would like to start my talk with the words of Dr. David Fleming from the Liverpool Museum. Museums can increase our sense of well-being, help us feel proud of where we have come from, can inspire, challenge, and stimulate us, and make us feel healthier. Among 17 SDG goals, I would like to highlight 3 of them in connection with the museum's social value and the role museums can play for the development of our society. And throughout my talk, I will provide some maybe successful examples of museum work in relationship with these goals worldwide and in Georgia. And these 3 goals are SDG 4, quality education, which is equally available to everyone, and inequality is eliminated in the educational system. SDG 8, decent. This is 4, this is 8. Decent work and safe working environments are promoted for all women, young people, and people with disabilities. And as SDG 10, reduce all forms of inequality, laws and social programs protect disadvantaged and vulnerable people. As you all know, in 2019, ICOM has issued a guide, and Alana has talked about that guide for a long time. And I just like to underline one abstract from it, where here we read civic engagement, education, research, and public participation are already included in a wide range of big picture agendas and initiatives. Museums are specifically mentioned in the work plan for the Paris Agreement, acknowledging the important role of the museums can play in enhancing the implementation of education, training, public awareness, public participation, and public access to information. But yes, most museums will be unaware of this. So opportunities for institutional sector and public empowerment are not currently being maximized. We need to find mechanisms to connect policy aims with delivery on the ground, and mechanisms to share expertise, communicate successes, and amplify messages and actions that will secure a sustainable future. Connecting with the SDGs can help museums of all kinds to connect with and support sustainable development and work in partnership with other sectors and with the society. And it's interesting, as you know, that museum ICOM has changed the museum definition, want to change, and they are still working on it. But the working definition sounds like that, and the first part of it is very interesting. Museums are democratizing inclusive and polyphonic spaces for critical dialogue about the past and the futures, acknowledging and addressing the conflicts and challenges of the present. They hold artifacts and specimens in trust for society, safeguard diverse memories for future generations, and guarantee equal rights and equal access to heritage for all people. And the other part is familiar for all of us. And let's start with SDG 4, quality education, which means quality education is equally available to everyone, and inequality is eliminated in the educational system. This education this statement refers to both formal and informal learning. For almost 10 years, I'd like to talk about Georgia and this part. For almost 10 years, the Ministry of Education of Georgia is implementing different activities and programs to develop inclusive education in schools. Many Georgian museums like GNM, Georgia National Museum, unification of 70 biggest museums of Georgia, has educational programs which are connected to national school curriculum, and in this direction, Georgia National Museum has even more ambitious plans to suggest schools to conduct regular school lessons on history, nature, science, literature, etc., right in the exhibition spaces. And of course, it means that classes will be inclusive. Education Department of GNM, together with the University of Exeter, and the European Research Council developed manuals for school teachers to make planning of their lessons in museum exhibitions even easier. For informal language centers, GNM developed special learning programs to learn foreign language, French, German, English, Turkish, in the exhibition spaces. Another important project is providing learning space for Georgia, a learning space of Georgian language for ethnic minorities in Georgia National Gallery at the exhibition of the most famous Georgian artist, Nikopoulos Manashvili, who lived in multinational capital of Tbilisi in the 90s, in the end of 19th century, beginning of 20th century, and he reflected the life around him in his works. And now I would like to move on to the next SDG 8. Decent work and safe working environments are promoted for all women, young people, and people with disabilities. The Ethics celebrated International Museum Day 2020. Museums for Equality. The slogan of the last year Museum Day was diversity and inclusion. And one of the maybe most interesting activities of that year of ICOM was the conference about diversity and inclusion by amplifying the voices of the museum professionals who are experiencing unequal working conditions linked to COVID-19 crisis. And this initiative was oriented towards educators and freelancers. As a response to social crisis and recent calls on museums to address historical inequalities, racism, and homophobia inside their walls, the conference, Ethical Challenges of Contemporary Collecting, was held. Nowadays, museums in Georgia open doors to and welcome hiring persons with disabilities in museum spaces, but unfortunately there are not concrete actions to promote and encourage disabled persons to work in museums. In fact, that museums can offer many different jobs which will be comfortable for persons with different disabilities to work on and in the spaces of museums. Now there is, unfortunately again, there's a very small number of persons with disabilities who are employed in museums. This year, Georgia National Gallery developed a project of a complete adaptation, and later I will talk a bit more about this project, a complete adaptation of its spaces, and the project included safe and comfortable environment as for visitors, as well as working spaces for blind or visually impaired persons. And now, SDG 10, reduce all forms of inequality. Laws and social programs protect disadvantaged and vulnerable people. One of the most significant examples in the World Museum Society is the Museum Change Lives campaign by Museum Association United Kingdom. I'm sure many of you have heard about it. The mission says museums can increase our sense of well-being, help us feel proud, and can inspire, challenge, and stimulate us, make us feel healthier. With the society facing issues such as poverty, inequality, intolerance, and discrimination, museums can help us understand, debate, and challenge these concerns. They can also enhance everyone's life chances by breaking down barriers to access and inclusion. Museums are doing this through active public participation, engaging with diverse communities and sharing collections and knowledge in ways that are transforming lives. Museums of all sizes with collections ranging from the fine art to social history are changing lives, often in partnership with community groups, health charities, and other third sector organizations. And the Museum Association is campaigning for museums to develop their role as social purposeful organizations, and there is growing evidence that they are working with their communities and delivering positive social impact. This type of work helps museums be more sustainable, and the public benefits it generates underline the importance of continuing public investment in them. Whether it's experienced Barnsley Museum, Dimension Cafe, or Cardiff Stories work with refugees and asylum seekers, museums across the UK are making a positive and lasting difference. The very important program initiated by the campaign by the campaign Museum Change Lives is their awards, which is, it's interesting that the nominations are open now. The call is open for the nomination of 2021. And maybe it is definitely the strongest tool to inspire museums to really change lives. The awards celebrate how museums across the UK but yes, unfortunately, it is still only for museums of United Kingdom. And it shows how UK museums are impacting people and communities. And the awards will be presented at a ceremony at 2021 MA conference. The last year most inspiring nominee was, the nominee is called the Radical Changemaker Award. There are few nominations, and one of them is called Radical Changemaker Award. And it recognizes the achievements of an individual in promoting one or more of the themes of the Museum Change Lives campaign in their museum. And the winner was Aditi Anand, Head of Creative Content at the Migration Museum. Aditi's work in the museum sector explores themes of migration, identity, and belonging. And most recently, she oversaw the transformation of a large former H&M and Lewisham shopping center to a temporary migration museum in less than 2 months. And she established a high-quality, relevant exhibition on the doorstep of a diverse community with high rates of economic deprivation. This kind of work of museum can be conducted as museum activism. And in September 2020, there was an online panel discussion organized by the Museum Association again and Museum Detox about how individuals and museums can confront racism in the heritage sector and proactively support and advance wider anti-racist movements. Meanwhile, some museums in USA, like Museum of Street Culture in Dallas, Texas, create exhibitions designed to support vulnerable local people. The Museum of Street Culture validates the history and everyday experience of people in public places through diverse forms of art, education, and new ideas activating social change at building community. The museum recently launched a project designed to engage the public in dialogue with people experiencing homelessness, challenging stigma and increasing awareness. One of the exhibitions was called A New Assemblage, organized in association with the National Sculpture Center, and contemporary sculptors and homeless artists utilizing found objects to create site-specific works at one of the local parks in the street, amphitheater, community garden, and on the streets, in the streets and the building, and they use the walls of the buildings. Exhibits like this couldn't come to a better time, with recent reports confirming that levels of homelessness are actually 5 times higher than previously thought. The same museum had an interesting education program picturing homelessness. The Museum of Street Culture, with support from the support staff, they worked with the children in the Saturday Kids Club, and they engaged participants grades 1 to 5, and they engaged the participants in a conversation about homelessness, and participants were able to view their work in an exhibition at the opening reception. And this program challenged children to explore stereotypes and needs related to family, shelter, food, and pets through collaborative drawings made by small groups of children that were printed for installation on that exhibition. Another social project of the museum is docent program. The docent program hired homeless two-pot clients to be paid docents for the Mary Ellen Mark exhibition, Looking for Home. Docents shared their stories with the visitors and intensified their experience, connecting the past with the present. And I'd like to bring here the words of the mayor of City of Dallas, Mike Rawlings. To have a unique museum like this is something that we can be proud of. Nobody has really ventured into this area, and I really think it's breakthrough. If we have enough time, I'd like to talk about Liverpool Museum in England. The director of this museum is Dr. David Fleming, and an exhibition of modern day slavery was held in 2015 and 16, an international slavery museum in northern England town, and it was just really focused on human rights. Social justice just doesn't happen by itself. It's about activism and people willing to take risks, says Dr. David Fleming, director of National Museums of Liverpool. And it includes this International Slavery Museum. It is under the umbrella of the Museums of National Museums of Liverpool. And the institution looks at aspects of both historical and contemporary slavery while being an international hub for resources of human rights issues. It's a member of the Liverpool-based Social Justice Alliance for Museums, formed in 2013, and now it joins more than 80 museums worldwide. And the aim of that organization is to encourage museums which engage with sensitive and controversial human rights themes to work together and share new thinking and initiative in a supportive environment. Both organizations reflect the way that museums are changing. Museums are not dispassionate agents. They have a role in safeguarding memory. We have to look at the role of museums and see how they can transform lives. And the exhibition title I mentioned was titled Broken Lives, and it was focused on the victims of modern and global day slavery, half of whom are said to be in India. And most of them are Dalits, or people formerly known as untouchables. The display provided a window into the experience of Dalits and others who are being exploited and abused through modern slavery in India. Dalits still experience marginalization and prejudice, live in extreme poverty, and are vulnerable to human trafficking and bonded labor. It was presented in partnership with the Dalit Freedom Network. The exhibition used photographs of film, personal testimony, and other means to show stories of hardship. And now I'd like to talk about the experience of Georgia and some maybe documents we have about in connection with SDG. One of the most important documents elaborated in 2016 by Ministry of Culture of Georgia was the Culture Strategy 2025 document. The vision of the strategy is to develop Georgia as a creative country and a regional hub where innovation and creativity, along with safeguarding and revitalizing national heritage and cultural diversity, are the fundamental pillars of social well-being and sustainable development. For that purpose, this culture strategy document defines 8 goals. And the second is the most important for us at the moment. It says access to culture and cultural diversity goal. Culture is accessible to all members of the society, and the freedom of culture expression is safeguarded. And its objectives are: culture is made accessible to all, including the communities in mountainous regions and the state border communities, occupied territories, and across the dividing lines of occupied territories. Cultural diversity for freedom of expression of different cultures and their interaction empowers the state and contributes to the society's development. And also another important document is the ratification. In 2013, Georgia ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. But unfortunately, national laws still require alignment with international standards. However, there's statistics on the number of persons with disabilities and their needs, and these statistics still remain unreliable, which negatively impacts the development of effective national policies and programs. Furthermore, in some social groups, for example, children with disabilities continue to suffer from stigma connected to disability. And during the last decade, concerning these questions and subject, tendency of increasing social responsibility in Georgian museums is becoming more and more obvious. Understanding the social role of the museum and working to strengthen it began with a variety of activities in Georgian museums. And the Georgia National Museum has planned many activities during the last 5-7 years. Beginning of the museum actions in Georgia is connected with the celebration of various international days. For example, International Day of Down Syndrome, International Autism Awareness Day, and etc., to raise awareness of disability issues. These types of events, promotions, or exhibitions were often initiated by organizations working on issues related to persons with disabilities, and was met with open doors and the greatest enthusiasm in the museum. One of the projects was Get to Know Me. It was a cultural action for raising awareness about Down syndrome audience, and was implemented by Union Our Children. This is an NGO which is conducting advocacy campaigns aiming to affect government policy. Georgia National Museum, Ministry of Diaspora Issues. The one-day action project included invited ministries, First Lady, and state officials to draw with children with disabilities having Down syndrome in one of the most famous galleries of Tbilisi, Georgia National Gallery. And it had been widely covered by mass media. And the next year, International Down Syndrome Day was celebrated again in the same space by an artist with Down syndrome and Arts Academy artist performance, and it was widely broadcasted in mass media again.
I do apologize. Sorry, we have only left maximum 3 minutes, and
yes.
Sorry, if we can summarize.
Thank you. Yes. Another very interesting exhibition was I See With My Fingers, was organized again with Arts Academy, and the important thing that was the participants and the exhibits were created by children and students with who were blind or with some partially sight problems. And another interesting exhibition was about evolutionary gender in Georgia. It was quite a big time ago, but was a very interesting issue about on the human rights and equality. And I would like to just, as I have run out of time, just to give some maybe kind of recommendations or advices to the museum workers. Making our museums really inclusive means our museums have thought about all kinds of visitors with special needs, and it is developing programs for refugees, so not only people with disabilities, but also for refugees, social disadvantaged children, or elderly generations living in caregiving institutions. And for the last 10 years, Georgian museums have worked with different international charity organizations like Caritas Georgia, Association Source Children's Villages International, and but mostly it were part of some projects and were just one occasion, and then they stopped. And it is generally proved that for valuable education and personal development and well-being of children or adults, availability of the cultural heritage for permanent availability is just a cornerstone. And I would like to highlight the importance of permanent work with social vulnerable groups. It is essential, and only this can lead to desired result. To ensure accessibility of cultural heritage for vulnerable groups in long perspective, each museum should consider and include this responsibility into its policy and create systematic programs for a whole year calendar. The collaboration with social organizations, NGOs, local communities, schools, caregivers, or educators will be one step forward. And this is kind of the references you may use. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you all the speakers of today's session, and I would like to address to the audience if you may have the questions to the speakers, which will be just addressed to them directly. if there is any question which can be just discussed during this few minutes, or which also we have during the session. So if not, once again, I would like to thank everyone, the organizers, the speakers for this session. And of course, we couldn't cover just everything during this in our session, how museums and SDGs can contribute to each other. But we can just agree that museums really can play a critical role in supporting the achievement of the SDGs and working with one another, with their stakeholders and with other sectors, and museums already contribute positively to many of the SDGs. And it is not the case that museums have to do something to complete, to implement this SDGs. Just it is not just only for this agenda, because we are underlying that we museums also need this SDGs just to move further and move forward with implementing our activities during this global changing world. So if the speakers has anything to say as a last word, if not, we can close the session. So
I just want to, I don't have a question, but I would
yes,
like
please.
to, I don't have a question, but
Yeah.
I'd like to appreciate ICOM Georgia for this wonderful session and all the speakers, and it was really very well done. So thank you.
Thank
Thank you, because the Sustainable Development Goals are, what is happening to the world is real.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if museums play their role, it's a wonderful thing. So thank you very much for this session.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roxana David. It was really important for us, your evaluation. Thank you very much. If no one has to say it as a last word, so Dr. Aliakina Kil, we can close the session, right?
So much for your all valuable words and shared for the Georgian experience. Thank you. See you in on Friday again, same hours.
Thank you. Thank you. And I wish you strong health. It is important for now, and the next will be followed as well. Thank you very much.